Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
The Word Docs would like to pay our respects to the Kaurna people on whose lands we are today, and to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And we would like to recognise that this is country of powerful storytelling and knowledges, and that we're honoured to be here today.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome, everybody, to Word Docs. I'm Dr. Sean Williams, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Amy T. Matthews.
Hello.
And Dr. Alex Vickery-Howe.
Welcome back.
This week we're talking about tropes and BookTok. I was briefly listed on TV Tropes as a trope creator for the Twin Maker trope until the world realised what I knew all along, which is that I didn't invent that because there are no new ideas. But tropes remain important in many different ways to writers, publishers and readers alike. And a discussion on this topic will inevitably lead us to BookTok, a TikTok subculture where book lovers discuss the books they can't stop talking about, to quote some site I found on the website. It's a hashtag that links creators to readers via book recommendations, reviews and memes, crossing genres, age groups, you name it. And on TikTok, at the moment, BookTok has over 61.9 billion views.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy, with some individual videos reaching upwards of 100,000 likes, and tropes are part of this conversation. So first, let me throw a question to you guys. What is a trope?
Just an easy one. Just a
an easy one. What
question
is it?
there, Alex.
It's a word that I struggle to spell. And
Really? How do you spell it?
I at one point was, I think, writing toupee to people, going, I'm not sure about the toupees you're using.
This is the enemies to lovers toupee.
And people quite rightly question my sanity, as they often do.
I guess the easiest way to say would be a story form, right? Like a plot archetype.
A plot archetype, yeah.
A plotter type? No.
Plotter type.
No, it's not going to work. That's a terrible point.
An archeplot.
I guess the following on question from that would be, what's the difference between a trope and a cliche?
Well, now that's interesting you should raise that, Alex. Luckily, we rehearsed this earlier. We didn't at all. There were several definitions online, and several things recur in these definitions, and that a trope is a significant or recurring theme, a motif, a commonly used device, or a cliche.
Okay.
But that's not the way it's used on BookTok, is it?
Well, a cliche is pejorative, where a trope isn't, I would think.
I feel like the way people are using it now is more about a story type than those things. Like, so Sean mentioned enemies to lovers, and obviously I'm in the romance women's fiction community, so they're huge on BookTok. So there's enemies to lovers is the number one trope in any kind of romantic fiction. And then there's friends to lovers.
Yep.
There's soulmates. There is love triangles.
Yes.
Forced proximity.
Forced proximity, yep. So arranged marriage is one of those where they're already married or where you're stuck together somehow.
There's love at first sight.
Yeah.
What about slow burn?
Yeah, I tend to write a lot of slow burns, so I'm down with that.
And what is a slow burn? Like a simmering romance that slowly unfolds over...
Sleepless in Seattle. That's a good example, isn't
Yes.
it?
Oh, yeah, true. I did a list. I did some research for this episode. You'll be pleased to know.
That's good because we didn't.
Yes. So I got a long list of the most popular ones, and there are so many lists. And as Amy correctly says, enemies to lovers is always the number one. And they're not always just romance. So morally grey villains is a trope. I hate everyone but you is what I'm saying to you guys now. No, that's not true. That is a trope as well. Right person, wrong time is another romance one.
Oh, did anyone read, sorry to interrupt.
No,
did
please do.
anyone read Daisy Jones and the Six?
I've got it, but I haven't read it yet.
because that's one of those, right person, wrong time.
That's on my never-ending leaning tower of books that I need to read.
Because Taylor Jenkins Reid is a BookTok sensation. Her books are totally all over BookTok.
That's really interesting. We'll come back to BookTok though. There's such a fascinating conversation to be had about BookTok. But I love the trope stuff. I love this sort of granular breaking down of stories into particular elements. Like,
do you think readers have already? Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off, Sean. But
please
do you
do.
think readers? He's going to be saying that all day.
I'm going
Please
to
do,
get the
Amy.
electric shocks out on you
Then
too.
he's going to kick me under the table. Do you think readers have always, or viewers have always thought about it? Or do you think it's a new phenomenon? Because it seems to be how readers are looking for books now. And I don't know if it's like internet searches or hashtags or...
That feels like the shift, absolutely. Because I was looking at the marketing of your book, actually, I think.
Cheers. You can mention it now if people would like to go buy it.
and what's it called, Alex?
Kit McBride Gets a Wife?
Gets a wife.
And what's the name of the author?
Amy Barry.
Amy Barry.
Amy Barry.
It's the third in the Holy Trinity.
Amy Barry the third. No.
But the ads, it was a collective ad, I think, that I saw that was for sort of like romance novels that have come out this month or this quarter or something. And the tropes were kind of flashing up. It was saying enemies to lovers, forced proximity, this one's got this one's got that. And I thought, while I think the tropes have always been there, the market or audience awareness of the tropes is now so strong that people are going in looking for these things. And then because I became fascinated with it, I went on to the Goodreads reviews of some romance books, including yours, which is doing very well. And the awareness of the conversations and the reviews is all about the tropes that they were expecting, the tropes they were really happy to see,
and they're
the
getting
tropes
quite
they wanted to see.
annoyed if they can't identify the tropes, right?
Like they get a little bit
tropes.
frustrated if it's not the one they're looking for, or if they can't pick it, and
or if you're advertising it and then not delivering it.
Yes, and so that's a really interesting thing, because I think of cliches as things that turn audiences off, but tropes, I feel there's a distinction there because it's something familiar that draws you in, that is, I guess, comforting or exciting.
Do you think that one person's trope, though, might be another person's cliche? So, for instance, the one bed trope, another romance trope. Some people might go, "Whoa, that's great! I love that trope." Some people might go, "Oh, not that again."
Not that again. Yeah.
Well, I think some things get tired, right, when everyone's been doing it a lot. So I've set on my topic this semester The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, which is a one-bed book. And that does it really well. But then because that was such a mega hit, there's been a whole bunch of others kind of in that vein. And after a while, you get a little bit tired of the same thing. Like you need to mix it up a little bit probably.
What's interesting about that is the one bed trope, to my mind, is something that could get tired. But enemies to lovers, I don't think will ever get tired because there's so many different ways to do that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's stop on that one because I find that fascinating. And I have a lot of students and postgrads who really love the enemies to lovers. What is it about enemies to lovers that we like so much?
My students tell me, this is, my source of information now is my students. It's two-way street. They tell me anecdotally that one of the things they like about it is that sense of the relationship being built on a foundation that is recognised power. So an enemy is someone who recognises someone else as an equal or a rival or a threat.
Yep.
And so it's starting at a place of kind of weird mutual respect, maybe antagonism, but weird mutual respect. Which is a good launching point for a relationship.
Yeah, that's interesting.
How do you feel about it? How do your students explain it or relate to it, Amy?
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot this semester, and I think because obviously there's so many, right? You can go right back because we're Star Wars fanatics as always to Han and Leia, right? The way they are antagonistic, but you can go all the way back to the screwball comedies and things like His Girl Friday, where they're divorced. They're a divorced couple, so it's second chance, but also enemies to lovers. And I think there's something about how when you get in a relationship or fall in love with someone, you get very triggered, right? Because you're very vulnerable. Like you're vulnerable to absolute emotional devastation. If this person can get past your defenses and really hurt you. So I think there's an awareness of vulnerability that kind of conjures up all these feelings that we then have to deal with somehow. And I think it's a way of playing out threat, like the way that the person you fall in love with is also a real threat to you emotionally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's true.
Interesting. I'm not a huge fan of conflict, so I actually prefer friends to lovers as
I like
a trope.
that. I like that too.
But that says more about me than about anybody else. I mean, that's a very popular trope, but it's not as popular as enemies.
See, I really like enemies to lovers more than friends to lovers.
That makes sense to me.
About me.
That makes sense to me, Alex. Right. So, Sean, what would one of your favourite friends to lovers be?
You've asked me on a day where I haven't had much sleep and my brain is not so great. But look, one of my students, one of our honours students, has written a really lovely friends to lovers romance for their honours creative work. I won't name them or the work, but the ending, I found myself getting very emotionally invested in this couple, and their getting together was absolutely thrilling. And let's go back to Kit McBride Gets a Wife. The tropes. There are several tropes in there. I mean, it's almost a love at first sight, wouldn't you say?
It is, yeah.
It's totally love at first sight, and there are little hiccups.
It's
along
also
the
a
way.
mistaken identity.
Yes.
Forced proximity.
Yes.
What else is it doing?
Is there a grouchy with a soft side?
Oh, yeah. What's it called? Grumpy Sunshine.
Yeah, Grumpy Sunshine. That's
good.
I
Lovely.
love that one. That's one of my favourite tropes.
I really love that.
Also because I think grumpy people are just inherently funny.
Yes.
Like if you think about all Harrison Ford's performances, his humour comes from just being grumpy and vulnerable at the same time.
Could it be secret identity as well?
Yes. Yep. Not to give anything away, people. But yeah, no.
And this is, I guess, it's interesting to explore just one book and discover how many tropes can apply to it. So every book isn't just one trope.
That's true.
And
people
one trope
argue over it. Like I'm sure people online are arguing over.
Absolutely,
things.
I'm sure. But I guess, I taught a week for Alex's, what's it called? Narrative and storytelling. And we were covering these kinds of tropes. And I think a good friends to lovers, for anyone who needs an example, is When Harry Met Sally, which is also doing enemies to lovers because they start off not liking each other at the very beginning. Yes. But most of the film is friends to lovers.
And there is a bit of forced proximity in their first, when they're stuck in a car together and they've got to drive interstate or something. I know that's not the whole film, but that section sort of kicks it off.
But it does hit the beats, doesn't it?
Yeah. I hadn't seen that film for 20 years.
It holds up really well.
I really fell in love with it. I mean, it is of its time and I acknowledge that, but it rings true. There's so many very fun. The Roy Rogers coffee table scene for me is just very funny.
It just holds up so well.
Yeah,
I think.
and the gender politics. The fact that the male characters was written by men and the female character was written by women or by a woman. I think there are still things that hold up really well. When you are writing something, do you consciously write with tropes in mind?
That was the question I was about to ask. Alex, well done. You've read my mind. You've read my notes over my shoulder.
Secret host.
I don't know because I want to say no, but you do that you're doing forced proximity if you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like you do know that they're going to be stuck together on this mountain, but I'm thinking about trying it now because I'm having to come up with ideas quite quickly and develop books quite quickly and thinking it might be a handy framework to start with, like as you're trying to brainstorm ideas.
It's another writing tool, isn't it, to help you get through a story, particularly, as you say, when you have to come up with one really quickly.
What about you guys?
I used working with the X really consciously when you, Amy, dared me to put romance in a science fiction novel, and there's forced proximity in there as well. And that was because I just had a really messy breakup with the partner that I was trying to still be friends with, and working with the X really spoke to me. So I very consciously embraced that and used it. I used Evil All Along. That's another romance one in my first space opera series that I wrote with
Evil
a fellow
All Along.
called Shane Dix. There's an ambiguous character that you meet at the beginning of this series, and 3 books later, he kills everyone. And some people were very upset about that, but those who liked the Evil All Along trope
So
were
is
happy.
Daenerys Targaryen evil all along?
Oh, spoiler alert for those who
come
haven't
on.
seen season 1.
Oh, come on.
Oh, sorry, show 1.
Show one.
Show 2 now.
Yeah.
That's right. And morally grey villains and morally grey heroes, like the stuff of Star Wars, aren't they? It's sometimes I very consciously go into stories thinking about these are the tropes I'm going to explore.
Oh, they're great fun too. Like they're just really fun to play with.
What about you, Alex? Do you ever think I'm going to do the end the world trope and
I
then
don't
just
think
stop
Alex. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I'm not sure how much you plan anything.
I plan things surprisingly meticulously. I just then
You do not, really?
Yeah, and then I just throw them away as I'm going. I go, oh, that's actually quite boring, that plan I had.
Because I know the ending, so let's make up something mad.
But it's interesting because with like theatre and musicals and things like this, in the past, I've been quite surprised with what has been the thing people have connected with. And when you look at it now through the lens of tropes, you go, oh, like when I did Once Upon a Midnight, of course they liked the vampire and the Japanese warrior doll who were ex-lovers who hated each other now and kind of hooked up again. Like you kind of go...
Because it's Buffy and Angel,
That's the obvious thing, right?
Right.
But at the time I was like, oh, it's not about that. It's about this other thing. And I think that happens with quite a few things I write where I go, oh, I think it's about this A plot. But the B plot is the one that speaks to all the tropes and is perhaps more interesting
and
to people.
To come back to your clever question, Alex, that you stole from Sean.
I didn't. Osmosis.
The thieving host. That's what you are.
I don't think you plan it, but it's in your subconscious.
Yes.
Like those story archetypes are so deeply embedded in us that they come out whether you plan it or not.
Mm.
Yes, and this relates to a question that I wanted to sort of raise with you guys. Like, is it? Do you think it's feasible to copyright a trope? But the fact that they're universal and the fact that they're everywhere, it's a bit like trying to copyright a colour. And I know some people do trademark colours and colour names, Vanta Black being the big one.
Wow.
But the law generally says that you can't copyright tropes because they're part of the public domain and considered not protected by copyright law.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, I know, right?
Cadbury Purple, is that another one?
Well, they tried Coke and Pepsi tried to copyright their red and blue and they were told you can't. Fair enough. I want to use red in my life.
I thought Coke got it from Christmas anyway, didn't you?
No, Christmas got it from Coke.
Christmas got it from Coke, sorry, yeah.
And can you imagine
Santa.
if Moonlighting tried to copyright Will They, Won't They?
Yeah.
And therefore
I
then the
know.
X-Files wouldn't have had
That's
that spark
right.
and so on and so forth.
You
So many
can't
great romances.
copyright real life, can you?
No, and that, okay, so that's so the tropes come from real life. Like when people talk about cliches, I think a lot of cliches come from real life. Like there's a reason they're cliches, right? Because people do become friends to lovers all the time, and the enemies thing is more about tension.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
That leads to conflict.
yeah, because also we all know when you first get into a relationship, you have more fights in your first couple of years than you do for the rest of your life.
Do they?
Yes, because you've got to get it all out. And also you've got to work out, like you take offence at things early on, whereas later on you're like, oh, I know why you do that thing.
That's
Like
just
you're
who you are, yeah.
you're just anxious or you've had a fight with your mother and that's why that's happening.
So it just
Whereas
settles down to like a simmering tension, resentment.
An underlying
I
resentment.
did read most couples, your fights that you have, you will continue to have. Like there are always your biggest fights, your
Certain trigger
unresolved
points.
issues.
Yeah.
And you're never going to resolve them.
See, I think I will sometimes just withdraw into a book or withdraw into a room, and I think if you don't know me, that reads as really cold shoulder. Then once you go, oh, that's just a thing he does, that's not so bad. But I think that these things do come from real life, and that's why I think people want them in their fiction and why they are now being marketed to in that way. Because I think there's a reason why you go to these tropes, because they're probably something that's going on with you in your real life, right?
Or resonate.
Or
with you
resonate
for
in that
whatever
way.
I
reason.
have this theory about Colleen Hoover. So for those of you who have not followed the Colleen Hoover coho phenomenon, she's been dominating the bestseller list because of BookTok. So she had at one point earlier this year 4 out of the top 5 of the New York Times bestseller lists were Colleen Hoover books.
Wow.
And they've been described as trauma porn. So the BookTok community will refer to them as romances, but they don't actually fit a romance definition because they often have a sad ending.
Right.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But they're about these very traumatic relationships. Like, so there might be abuse or they might be in prison but there's usually a reason they can't be together. And I think that's speaking to often, that we all do live through relationships where you love someone, but it's never going to work out. Like you have an ex that you did love and it just couldn't work.
That you still think about, and that pain, that emotion is still quite raw.
Yeah, and I think it's working that stuff through.
What's the trope there? What's the trope? What kind of tropes are we
That's a good
referring to here?
question.
Happily Never After.
Happily Never After. Let's copyright that one.
That's
Sean.
great.
Hashtag.
But I mean, it's Gone with the Wind, isn't it? It's the Frankly, my dear, like they never love each other at the same moment in time. He loves her, and then by the time she loves him, he doesn't love her anymore.
Yes.
And so, I don't know, there's a lot of stories about divorce. Even if you go back to the Disney films like The Parent Trap, right? This fantasy about divorced people realizing that actually that we do love each other and we can get back together is a fantasy, because a lot of divorces come with that grief of I did love you.
Yes.
And maybe I still do love you, but
Or I love the memory of you, or I love the way that I used to identify myself when I was with you. And all that very complicated.
Some people aren't fixable, right? Because of, alcoholism, mental illness, sex addiction, inability to be vulnerable, rage. People have a lot of issues that never get better, that wear the other partner out. So the breakups are kind of not about not loving the person, but just about I can't be with you.
So this brings us to BookTok.
That was a cheery segue.
That was a cheery segue. I took that opportunity as soon as you took a breath.
Let's just drag everyone down today.
Yeah, that's right. Happy anniversary. Everybody is having an anniversary today. Or going on a first date. Do either of you, I haven't really engaged with BookTok much. I'm aware of it, and I actually love the idea of being able to sort the many billions of stories out there into stories that I might like via Tropes that I feel like that day. But do you guys engage with BookTok at all? Do you use it? Do you?
I'm just looking at Amy.
I've only just started. I am. Look, none of us are that young.
Alex is officially not young anymore.
Alex is the youngest of us. But all our students use it. Not all of them, but a big chunk of them. And I did go to a conference this year and went to a session on BookTok and how it's used. And it's really not driven by authors or publishers. It is driven by readers. So it does function kind of as word of mouth. But it's huge. It's driving the industry at the moment. It's definitely driving the bestseller lists right now. So I have been watching it, and I have done 6 BookTok videos at the date of recording this podcast. But I'm still getting my head around it. I think I'm probably too old to ever be any good at it. Although I have a film degree, so, I'm not as bad as some people.
Yeah, if I was ever going to do it, I'd have to do it tongue-in-cheek. I couldn't do it earnestly.
I think that's the key. Some people do it earnestly, though.
I think you do it the way that suits you.
Yes.
And hopefully you'll find an audience that will respond to it, hopefully. What about as readers, though? If you were able to, and what we are now, to search on whatever strange cross-section of fiction that's out there, like, I don't know, say, coloured gay elf erotica, but without dragons, there'll be something out there like that. And searching by tropes might be able to help you in a way that searching by genre would not.
Yeah, well, I have to say, BookTok, I feel like I'm talking too much today.
No,
keep talking.
Please do. If you don't talk, I have to talk, and that's no one wants that.
You're riveted. Good. I think BookTok and Bookstagram and those kinds of things are filling a need, because I feel like when the world moved online and the rise of Amazon and other online, and Kindle and Nook and all the online world, browsing changed. Yeah. And it was hard to find books. I think it was really hard for publishers to get books it still is, to get books in front of people. And I think these kinds of hashtags are a way that you can browse for books.
Yeah, because I was at that Dimix in Adelaide, the Regent Arcade one, the other day. Little plug there. Beautiful building.
It's beautiful.
It is so lovely.
And
beautiful place to have a launch too.
Yeah, we were there the other day for Sean's launch.
That's in fact why I was there. I forgot that part.
2 books.
He launched
on
2
one
books.
day, and they are called...
that's not the right title.
They are not called.
They're not called Her Perilous Mansion. That's another book. The side call to that book, Honour Among Ghosts, was one of the books that we launched that day, and the other one was Uncanny Angles, a collection of short stories.
You were in Dimix the other day.
So I was in Dimix the other day after that launch or during that launch, and I was just moving between the shelves, and I said to the people I was with, each one of these books has been, preciously put together meticulously by not only an author but illustrator, publicity team, publisher. There's a whole, there's a team of people behind each of these books, and they, you look at them and go, any one of these could be brilliant, but I have no way of kind of working my way through this sea unless I'm looking at pictures or genre or whatever. So I think these tropes are a way of giving you more specificity to help you through that sort of jungle. But I'm more inclined to just randomly grab something.
Yeah.
I'm still more inclined to do that. I'll go, that one speaks to me for whatever reason. I'll grab that. Then I grab 5 and
I listen
my
to
book
word
tag.
of mouth. Like the author I discovered just recently, whose name I've forgotten, was recommended to me by you, Amy.
Yeah, you mean
Katrina
Ward.
Amazing author, incredible author. I now will read everything that I can get by her. But I might not have picked her up if I'd seen her in a bookshop, but I would never have seen her in a bookshop because for every book in the bookshop, there's like 1,000 that don't make it into the bookshop, that any one of which I might love.
So one thing, yes, searchability. But the one thing I find really interesting about BookTok is, for those of you who haven't looked, are the aesthetics, like the physicality and materiality of the book is really important. So they're always hard copy books, obviously, because they have to hold them up and they do videos, and there's like ones where they throw them down and you get to see the spines. And so the actual physical book is kind of fetishized on BookTok.
Okay.
And they annotate,
object.
so they use highlighters to kind of highlight their favourite passages and show them. They use little coloured tags to kind of, and so people will show how much they annotate their book. Bookshelves are really fetishised, full of books. So one thing that's interesting is this return to the physical object of the book.
Yes.
That's really interesting because I don't read physical books and haven't for years. It's all on
really?
Kindles.
I do
still
both.
buy books, but I love my copy of your new book. What was it called again, Amy?
Kit McBride Gets
a Wife. It's a beautiful cover, beautiful book, but I'm never going to read the actual paper version, but I love having it on the shelf. Thank you very much for my copy.
And then you read it on the Kindle.
Then I read it on the Kindle
I do
because
both.
I like to read at
both.
night when there's no light on. And
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Because I wake up really early in the morning and don't necessarily want to get up. And it's like I don't want to turn on the light because I'll wake someone up.
Yeah.
So that's when I get my Kindle out.
Totally.
Or my phone. I have to admit, like the younger ones, because millennials and Zs tend to read on their phone a lot.
Wow. See, no, I'm an old man in my reading habits. I put the light on and the comfort of others be damned. And I read the book.
I can't imagine why enemies to lovers is your favourite trope.
Oh, that's right. Maybe lovers to enemies is actually your favourite trope.
And your next romance will be called The Man Who Turns the Light On.
A happily never after. by
Never After by Alex Vickery.
Howe. So there's a place you think for this.
I think the object matters. I mean, I think that's really interesting because one of my problems is I'm about to live in a very small apartment and I don't know how I'm going to fit all my books in. But I like having the object. I like having, still like that with DVDs. I've got to let that go as well, I think. But or albums or,
I struggle with that too. I love the material excitement of having a wall of Golance yellow jackets or all the books that I loved as a child.
And if you've been to Sean's house, the whole hallway is a bookshelf. It's like the longest bookshelf I've ever seen.
And there are DVDs and CDs and all sorts of stuff, all these physical things, but I never use those physical media anymore. And that's interesting, that point you raise, Amy, about that on this virtual medium, on this unreal medium, people are emphasising the physicality of the
Yeah, and I think there's a
media.
return to that. And I think like seeing bookstores reopen, even just our small city, like they're back in the centre of the town. We're getting new bookstores.
Which is great.
And that seems to be more popular than ever. It's constantly crowded. And how important then do you think the physicality of a book is? Because I have this thing that the physicality of the book does affect my reading experience. And by the physicality, I mean page quality, spacing, typefaces, all of that.
Sure, it does. And there's nothing I hate more than loving a book but hating the way it's printed. So at least on my Kindle I can change the font, change the page size, all that kind of stuff.
I do like to dog ear a page. I'm a fan of dog earing and to come back to it later. If I really love a book, I go buy it in hard copy.
Absolutely, me too. And if it's a book by a friend of mine, unless they beat me to it, like Amy did, I'll buy a physical copy and then buy the Kindle and read
too,
that.
but he already bought
I already bought it.
Oh, damn, that makes me feel
Got
guilty.
to sign it.
I'm always the dunce.
You bought a Kindle version, Sean.
I did buy a Kindle version.
You did buy a version.
I bought it, and in fact, I've already ordered the second one in advance on the Kindle, and I cannot wait for it.
I can nearly show you the
exciting.
cover. I could probably show you too, but I couldn't show the viewers, their listeners yet.
Well, you can't really show the listeners
I could
on a
put it on
podcast anyway.
Social media.
Yeah. Well, show us and we'll just make lots of ooh sounds.
Ooh. Oh, that's the best cover I've ever seen, Amy. Oh,
Can't believe he's wearing that.
So
Me neither, to be honest.
We're about out of time, unfortunately, because this is such an interesting conversation. And I think there's a lot to be said for the idea of tropes and BookTok.
We could actually do future episodes where we take one trope at a time and consider tropes.
That's right. But for now, I'd like to raise a few ending tropes.
Ooh.
And I thought, I'll look it up online. There can't be that many. I'll run through them all. But in fact, I didn't even get halfway through the A's because there are so many. Like 100% completion, I think, was the first one. That sounds a bit rude.
What does that mean?
It means you've completed all the tasks.
Oh, right.
And that's done.
Right.
Well done.
All's well that ends well is an obvious one. It all was all just a dream. That's a terrible one.
Don't do that, students.
I can't stand. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's so bad.
I've had script editors tell me to do that, and I've gone,
No.
Oh, take the money and run. But the one I thought we'd end on is, and the adventure continues.
Oh,
now
like that. Is that our new tagline?
It's our new tagline.
that's brilliant.
it?
That is
Oh.
better than happy writing.
I don't know, because people love happy writing, Alex.
Do they?
I have people say it to me now.
Oh, that's my worst nightmare.
We're going to get T-shirts that
There's
say
our
it.
other tagline. That's my worst nightmare. I like happily never after.
I love happily never after.
But not for the ending of our podcast. That
We're
would
never
be-
going to end.
No, we're going to. The adventure will always continue. So
Lovely.
thank you, lovely friends. It's lovely to chat with you about tropes. There's probably a trope about three wise writers getting together. Oh, three wise witches. That's what we are.
Yeah.
Three wise men? That's three wise men. I'm confusing my tropes. Thank you very much for this entertaining conversation.
The witches that were there for the birth of Christ. That's
the
what he
lion,
means.
the witch, and the wardrobe.
Actually, I'd followed that religion, Alex. The three wise witches who came to the birth of the warlock of Nazareth.
Oh, well.
Bringing entrails.
All
and,
right.
yeah,
The
okay.
adventure is continuing, people.
Until next time, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And happy writing.
Happy writing.
Happy writing.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them starts with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
I'll try not to. I'll just put
Oh, he's
this up.
recording now, so everyone.
No, I'm hoping to get a little bit for the end, and I was hoping to get fuck yes.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, mate.
Fucking A for Amy.
And Alex. Fucking
Yeah,
A for
hang on,
Alex.
fucking A
Yeah.
for Alex.
Don't need to clap. I'm really sad. I feel like we should just clap for old time's sake.
Hooray for Amy. Yay! Amy's new book. Hurrah! What's it called again?
You had two, so like I feel like you've trumped me.
I have.
Yeah,
They do want these slurping noises. Put the
There's
drink
no
over there.
slurping. All right.
Hang on, like this. Like,
Oh no, it's the worst.
Now I need to have one too.
Oh. No.
Alex, stop making that terrible noise.
Alex. Fucking Alex.
A for atrocious.
This is how they bully me. Just behind the scenes, this is how they bully. And they whip me.
You're taller
This
than
is never
all
going to
of
go
us.
to air, though, you know. No one's going to hear this.
Me?
Yeah, Alex, you're taller and have more hair. You deserve to be bullied. And you're the youngest.
I
That's what
know.
the youngest of four.
Oh, barely.
Fucking A, Alex.
Fucking
all right.
A for Alex.
All right, everyone focus together.
Fucking focus.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.